The future of technology has infinite potential. When the world becomes mundane, they build alternate realities. When they grow tired of walking on land, they harness the power of flight and take to the skies. If machines could comprehend thought, they can harness that power to dive into data. When physical boundaries divide us, they build a world where everything is connected. They're pioneers, risk-takers, and trailblazers driven by their desire to invent, explore, and inspire, gathered here, ready to unlock the future of technology. Listen as tech titans share their visions for a smarter future. Witness how technology has built a digital nation. Embark on the journey of digital discovery. Unleash your imagination on the world. Join our convention as ideas collide. Tech giants and geeks alike. Find your place here with us. Apsara Conference, where ideas collide to birth a brighter future.
The pandemic made the whole world pause. But that didn't mean we stopped moving. We evolved. We went digital, mobile, virtual, social. With new ideas, new designs, new opportunities, new innovations. And we sought out new solutions, new platforms, new partners, new customers. The only certainty now in this new world is digitalization. Alibaba Cloud is APAC's #1 cloud service provider, supporting you with cloud computing, data intelligence, mobile collaboration, and industry intelligence. We digitalize retail because we leverage our vast user understanding to create a seamless user experience. We digitalize finance because people demand even safer and more secure services. We digitalize education because today's classroom is in a global living room. We digitalize manufacturing, logistics, media, gaming, and more. For peace of mind for you and your customers. And because every company needs innovation. The world has turned a corner, and the digital world has fully begun. Alibaba Cloud helps to be your partner in accelerating your business. Ready, set, digitalize. Accelerate digitalization with Alibaba Cloud.
我觉得最终我们通过组织的数字化、业务的数字化，让这个企业变得更敏捷它更敏捷的去响应这个市场。这方面我觉得，特别是在阿里云在中国大陆积累了非常多的一些经验。我们也计划进一步在亚洲特别是东南亚一带加大这个云计算的这个投入所以我们推出了一个叫数字亚洲的加速计划。我们准备在未来3年投入10亿美金 来完成我们的3大这个目标第一呢是要服务10万家科创企业，第二呢要提升10万个开发者的专业能力，第三呢我们要准备要培养100万的数字化人才。我们也有个3大的个计划第一的人工智能引领计划第二个是数创企业的引领计划，第三呢这个数字人才的引领计划我们通过我们的一些培训的体系课程让我们的更多的东南亚的开发者来了解云计算，来了解这个数字化，来了解这个智能化，在我们在中国市场的一些经验实践我们也会带到这个东南亚一带我们跟东南亚的合作伙伴一起来共创数字化的未来。
Since the launch of the pre-employment card program initiated by the Indonesian government to develop competence and increase competitiveness of the workforce during the pandemic, we are also excited to join hands with Alibaba Nanyang Technological University Joint Research Institute, one of the top public universities in the world, to present the Digi Talents Forward program, an advanced digital talent program where we leverage NTU's mini master curriculum for the senior professionals in the tech companies and public sectors. Moreover, we will look into enterprises' digital transformation topic and call on global developers to take the AI challenge. The very first topic we choose will be the Global AI Maritime Meteorology Challenge. Together, we shall unleash the power of data for maritime sector with global developers and research institutes. Under Digipreneurs Forward, Alibaba Cloud will cooperate with the venture capital, media, and local partner to help startups build their business success with innovative digital technologies and access to funding opportunities.
All right, and thank you for the wonderful videos. Hello and welcome to today's webinar on product success in 2021, trends you must know. This is brought to you by Alibaba Cloud and TechNode Global. Alibaba Cloud is hosting its annual summit Apsara conference this week, and as part of the conference, we're proud to host this Alibaba Cloud Community Day event. TechNode Global, we're a pan-Asia tech media bridging China and Southeast Asia tech ecosystems. And we hope all of you here today will learn and take away some key insights from today's panel of experts and be able to apply it to your benefit. Now, there is a Q&A segment at the last 10 minutes of the session, so feel free to post any questions you might have, and we'll try to answer them. Okay, now without further ado, let me introduce the speakers for today. Now, first of all, we have Mr. Robin Teurlings, CEO of the Startup Buddy, a one-stop solution for founders to help them build from ideation to a successful startup. Next, we have the Chief Product Officer of Endowus, JX Lai. Endowus is a Singapore-based fintech company that empowers people to take control of their financial future. Third, we have Anuj Jain, CEO and co-founder of Startup O, a global startup platform for assessments, investments, and cross-border business scalings. And lastly, we have the founder and CEO of Hearti, a fintech venture company that provides cutting-edge tech platforms to insurers and banks, Mr. Keith Lim. Of course, we also have our moderator or host today, Angelo, the editor of TechNode Global. So Angelo will take the session today to kickstart this interesting conversation about anything about products. And today we have this exciting lineup of panels here to share with us. So without further ado, Angelo, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, Stanley. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, panelists. So as Stanley mentioned, I am the editor of TechNode Global, and I hope to have a very meaningful and insightful discussion this afternoon. So before anything else, I would like to ask our panelists to make some introductions about yourself and about your organization. Over to you, Anuj.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Stanley, for the invitation, and Angelo for moderating the whole thing. It was a pretty impressive introductory video, and good afternoon to everybody who's attending this panel. Appreciate your time. I'm Anuj Jain, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Startupo, which is a global venture platform, which is known for its online assessments with a proprietary methodology that we deploy using data science and a technology product that we have built. We also have an asset management firm, which is MAS licensed, which makes investments into those companies which rank up using the proprietary algorithmic way, having very objective sort of assessments versus our own biased understanding of which founder to invest and back. And finally, we don't stop at investing, but we also help companies build the real lifeblood, what we call revenue, using a vast network of global experts, partnerships, and systematic ways to scale companies. And this we obviously do with this idea of having a approach of discovering deserving founders, and our DNA is about building great companies together. And as we know, building great companies require capital and networks, and we provide them efficiently to the deserving founders. Prior to starting Startupo, I kind of become a corporate dropout in 2012, and since 2013, I've been involved in this ecosystem with a failed startup of my own to begin with, then helping a company scale in Asia successfully. I've also trained over 200 plus founders with a boot camp that I used to take for every weekend for 3 years prior to starting Startupo. And now at Startupo, we have engaged with 2,000 plus companies from 47 countries, breaking this hyper-local nature of the venture ecosystem. And this allows me to work with roughly 50 odd companies from seed to Series B level through our investments, as well as through our scale-up exercises that we do for these companies to move. And prior to my reinvention in this startup ecosystem, I was working for 15 plus years in FMCG sector with companies like Procter & Gamble, GSK, and the French conglomerate called BIC. So that allowed me to help to learn how to commercialize in Asia. And I worked from Japan to Jakarta to India and China, different markets, which I'm transposing now, that learning into the technology space, where it's not only, and which is relevant to today's topic, it's not only building, which is important, but it is commercializing or taking or building something which can be commercialized is something that we specialize in. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that introduction, Anuj. Very insightful and interesting. Next we have Robin. Kindly make some introductions and say something about what you do at the Startup Buddy.
Yeah, thanks very much, Angelo, and also TechNode and Alibaba Cloud for having me. I'm Robin. I'm Dutch by birth, but I live in Singapore since 6 years. I'm the founder CEO of the Startup Buddy. We are an online acceleration and fundraising platform. We now have entrepreneurs from over 100 countries. 2,500 entrepreneurs are building startup ideas on our platform, and we connect those to 1,300 investors worldwide. We're also now in the process of setting up our own fund, the Zero Emissions Fund, that we're launching next month during Switch here in Singapore. Prior to becoming an entrepreneur, I was in corporate life, so I worked for big companies like Accenture, ING Bank. And then when I moved here, I had to start over my life, and I figured I'd try something myself. Like Anuj was saying, the first time it didn't go well. I abandoned my first company after 2 years, and then we started analyzing what went wrong there. And we kind of came to the conclusion that when you're a first-time founder, it's very difficult to onboard in entrepreneurship. And that's how we started out setting up the Startup Buddy. And now we have a fully online platform where you can learn how to become an entrepreneur, connect to mentors, and raise funding. We don't hear you.
You're on mute.
Oh, I think I was muted. Thank you very much, Robin. So next we have Keith. So any introductions from your end and what you do at Hearti?
Thank you, Angelo. Hi, everyone. My name is Keith. I'm the CEO and founder of Hearti Lab. Hearti Lab is a B2B business where we build products for banks and insurance companies, mainly for ecosystem players, where we embed financial products like insurance products or lending products to the whole ecosystem, where we allow APIs connectivity, we allow artificial intelligence to dictate and make buying and selling these products easier. So our customers are across Southeast Asia, where banks and insurance company would use our product to reach out to their partners as well as customers. Before I started Hearti Lab, I was from the corporate world. I used to run Moody's Analytics. Moody's is a rating company. And under Moody's Analytics, we are a software arm where we provide regulatory compliance software to banks. So my career has been in building up products and software for banks and insurance companies.
Thank you, Keith. Now over to you, JX, for a bit of introduction and what you do at Endowus.
Hey guys, I'm JX. I'm a partner and chief product officer at Endowus. Endowus is Singapore's first and only digital financial advisor where you can invest your cash, SRS, and CPF. Right now, we are at around 80 people, of which more than 60% of our company are made up of engineers, product managers, designers. I run the product team, and we're working on basically developing a fee-only model where we provide unbiased access to great financial instruments, unbiased advice, as well as low cost, along every parts of the way. And I've been at Endowus. We found a company about maybe, we launched our product about 2.5 years ago. And before that, I actually started my career in SF, in the Valley, where I worked at Dropbox. That was sort of like the peak of, when times were really good in the Valley. And, any company that you touch basically, went public. So I was there for about 3 years and then moved on to Lyft, which was a very different industry that was at the height of the ride-sharing wars. And after Lyft and experiencing all of that bloodbath and all of that growth, it was crazy because I think, the first week I joined was when delete Uber happened. And so, imagine you walk into the office and then suddenly all of the graphs that you had tracking your user numbers doesn't even matter anymore because you just see all these spikes that showed like, 1,000% growth overnight. And the craziest thing is that you didn't even do anything. You had nothing to do with that, right? You just happened to be in the right place at the right time. So there was that. But, I think that I was itching for more. And that was around 2016, 17, when tech in China, really, really boomed. And so I actually moved to China with my wife to start ByteDance's office in Shanghai, which is pretty counterintuitive because from a tech perspective in China, Shanghai is actually like a 10th tier city. It's a city where no one wants to go because there are no engineers there, right? It's a great financial center. It's great for expats. But hey, if you want engineers, you go to Beijing, you go to Hangzhou, you go to Guangzhou, you go to Shenzhen, Wuhan, and then maybe you get to Shanghai. But it was an interesting experience because we wanted to start a company or a team over there that gave us some distance from our headquarters in Beijing, but also work on international products. And so what I was working on was launching a music product in Indonesia, India, and in Brazil. And so after all of that, I think I'm born and raised in Singapore. I'm Singaporean, so it was just great to come home and partake in sort of the burgeoning tech scene. And so that's why I'm here today.
Okay, thank you for that, JX. Now, that's a very interesting, background you have there, JX. So you're not currently work in a fintech company, but you've, developed products ranging from file sharing, ride sharing, and you mentioned music, right? And even social media. So based on your experience and based on your, experience with Endowus, what are the trends and the challenges in building a product from your perspective?
I would say that maybe that there are two things that I would share about that. I think what's really interesting to me is that at the end of the day, we're building a product to fit into a business model, which means that it must be something that people are willing to pay for. And in my mind, broadly, there are like sort of three business models that you have in the world of the internet. The first is a SaaS, right? Which is you build software and then you sell a subscription. The second is a transactions platform. Usually it's a double-sided marketplace where you have buyers and sellers in a platform in the middle. And the third is to sell ads. And so broadly speaking, these are the three main areas. And so in my career, I've strived to experience all three before deciding what I want to get into. So that is sort of like the broad way I think about it. I would say that most models kind of like fit into to one of the three. Now, Endowus is kind of like in the second model, right? We're a platform. There are buyers and sellers. On one side, we have the funds that we help to distribute. And on the other side, we have the clients that buy it. And I would say that, if I were to touch on something that's a bit more specific, if you were to ask me, hey, what are some of the trends and some of the thoughts, on product development, I would say that in Endowus, we're in a very unique area of in fintech. And fintech is really, really tough because it must be the marriage of financial services and technology. When I came back 2.5 years ago, I was like, hey, we got to do something in financial services in Singapore because in my opinion, that is sort of the most promising industry. To me, it's kind of like, hey, if you want to do e-commerce or whatever, at this point in time, right, like go to Indonesia, right? Go to Vietnam, go to India, where you have a big population. But if you want to be in Singapore, my view is that financial services is the way to go. The problem with financial services is that I can build the best product. I can hire the best engineers, but it doesn't matter if you don't have a license. So if you'd ask me, like, hey, what some trends in thinking about that? When I think about fintech, I think that it's the marriage between what you need to do in financial services, which is where all of the regulatory stuff, all of the compliance stuff, you just need to have very deep knowledge about that. And then marrying that on the technology side to figure out within all of those constraints, what can you do on the product side? And you don't want to think that, one is better than the other or it's two completely different industries. But yeah, that would be my thoughts and sort of the broad and then narrowing down to financial services.
Okay, thank you for that, Jake. So you mentioned the challenges about dealing with regulation, compliance, and partners and financial companies as well. So I need to direct a question to Keith. So from perspective of partnerships and working with, I believe you work with financial institutions, insurance providers, as well as the clients, right? So what are the trends and challenges in that regard?
Yeah, I guess JX has pretty much said that as well, where you probably have a product that you're trying to sell to end consumers, right? In my case, I deal with a lot of institutional customers like banks and insurance company, not the typical consumers, where these customers probably know what they want. Their problem statement is clearer in that sense. If you're providing a regulatory solution where banks need to do some regulatory report to the MAS or regulators, you probably want to figure out what they need first, right? So the way I look at building a product would be starting with a problem statement that my customers have. I have kind of built quite successful products in my view where I go to a customer with nothing, maybe just a PPT of some ideas, and then I start, to get their requirements in. I would then co-build with them, taking in their requirements. I provide that technology support and the development, and then we develop, the product from ground up. That means I probably have quite a good market product fit where I can bring this product to the next customer or to the next partner that I may have. So it's about collaboration. I guess that would be the way I summarize it.
Okay, thank you for that, Keith. And an add-on question to that. So there's a trend today about neobanks or digital banks, right? So would you consider it a challenge working with companies that can perhaps build their own products themselves, competing with them or partnering with them?
Exactly, and that's what we always have to stay relevant and ahead of the curve, because banks and insurance company, they have their internal development team, right? So what's so unique that we can bring to them that they cannot build on their own? That then goes down to the business model, right? You could build a product and your neighbor next door could build a product, right? So what would you be make you stand out? One is, of course, you build something that really gives a solution to the problem, like what I mentioned earlier. Secondly is you probably build it cheaper, faster, and more scalable, because you probably have a business model that allows certain subscription that takes place where you actually reduce the cost of building that in-house. Secondly, you probably bring some ecosystem partners to them where, if you are just building a piece of software for a bank, the bank probably can replace it next year or a few years later with their own product. So you probably bring in some different partners that they can work with, and you provide that competitive advantage.
Thank you for that insight, Keith. Now I direct a question to Anuj. You mentioned in your introduction that you have supported quite a number of startups and worked with more than 200 founders, right? So would you consider, from your perspective, that these teams or these startups and companies are your product? And what do you think in terms of support structure? What can organizations like a startup provide to founders or product developers or companies that want to succeed in a competitive market?
I think today, we have to look at it from some of the trends that I have observed in my own journey before we kind of created Startup 5 years back. And I'd like to highlight 3 key trends, and then you will understand that what the support to deserving founders means, right? So the first trend that we observed is that technology is becoming highly commoditized by the day. What I mean by that is that the barriers to compete are coming down. So everybody can actually, learn faster, create something. Cost of, thanks to Alibaba Cloud and other infrastructure companies, launching a company is becoming cheaper and cheaper by the year. Technology is becoming commoditized. Barriers between industries, geographies, everything is like kind of falling through. Now, in this case, earlier, 5 years back, if the question was, can it be created cheaply, better, faster? Today, the question should be, should it be created? Because the question for all founders and all is to ask, and I think Keith also and JX mentioned, it's about commercialization and viability. So that is one trend. The second is venture ecosystem, if you really look at it, across the world, is highly opaque, very fragmented, and highly subjective and hyper-local. It is still, so, it's still not, you have to kiss a lot of frogs to access resources, even if you have built a good product, to access capital and networks. And final, and the third trend is that everybody, because of this hyper-local nature, and it's a black boxy industry, if you really look at it, you read a lot of media, which is very Silicon Valley or large ecosystem focused. Now, you forget that launching a product in Silicon Valley with a $1 trillion economy just in the backyard, or a homogeneous market like US, is very different than actually finding success in Asia. So combining these 3 aspects of commoditized technology, hyper-local nature of venture ecosystem, and this whole madness of just metric, the only metric is fundraise. But we all know who have developed business that beyond fundraise, it's about actually building revenues and finding the product market fit. What we have done and created the product is to provide a merit-based, democratic way, a platform which is global, breaking the boundaries geographically. And that's where we have founders from 47 countries without even marketing it, because they resonate with this feature of providing an opportunity, which is an equal opportunity to prove themselves, but not to me or a micro VC sitting in a corner in Singapore. But we have a community of more than 150 odd global experts, exited entrepreneurs, specialists who actually assess through online interviews, and then our algorithmic process identify who deserves capital and who deserves global networks to be plugged in. So that is something that we believe is the best support, is to provide a fair and square chance to any entrepreneur to be able to learn, to be able to connect, to prove themselves, to get the capital, and be part of a community which is always going on, because the journey is never absolute. It's a dynamic journey. So even today you don't get it, doesn't mean that you won't succeed. And that's how we support, through network and capital efficiently deployed on our platform to the ones who prove themselves.
Okay, thank you for that, Anuj. So you mentioned network, you mentioned community. Now, Robin, what do you think is the importance of these aspects, right? You mentioned earlier in that for founders, right, they can build on your platform. So if I'm a founder, if I'm building a product, what can I expect from a support system like the Startup Buddy?
Okay, so usually when somebody starts a company, right, they have an idea or something in their head they want to build to start with. But 90% of the rest of building a company is actually quite generic. Like everybody here on the panel and probably also in the audience has to do some kind of marketing, has to set up some kind of legal paperwork for employee contracts or partner contracts or whatever. We have to build either a product or an online service. So they start out with an idea that's unique to them, but then 90% of the other work is quite generic, and it's even quite generic across the world, like Anuj was also saying. Like if you set up a company here in Singapore, or you do it in China or in the US, other than how you communicate it to your customers and how you have to implement a lot of your legal work, a lot of the rest is actually quite equal compared to different countries amongst each other. That's also why, similar to Anuj, we have been able to also grow very much outside Singapore, because a lot of what we provide on the platform is applicable anywhere. It doesn't matter if an entrepreneur is in India, in China, or in Indonesia. In the end, they have to go through a lot of the steps. We started out from the problem that we had ourselves, that we didn't have this support system. That's why our first company didn't go the way it was supposed to. And we started building the Startup Buddy because we wanted to have a scalable way that anybody could use anywhere at any time, which wasn't really possible for the traditional solutions, typical accelerators, because the old accelerators, sorry, I call them the old accelerators, but the old accelerators, they have an intake process. You get selected, you fit the profile or you don't. And if you're very, very lucky, you're one of the 5 or 10 companies that actually get the support that you need and why you were applying in the first place. We're switching that around so anybody can join our platform, and we filter out companies later on. Something else that I saw as a trend this year that radically changed compared to 2 years ago is the Corona crisis and how investors are looking at companies. 2 years ago, at least, we had a very big problem explaining to investors how fundraising should work through a platform like the Startup Buddy. The general conception was fundraising has to be done face-to-face over a beer or at a conference. We were trying to explain to investors that we thought it would be possible based on the data in a platform and via video call, etc. as well. Last year, you saw a very, very quick change on that. In April, there was 4 or 5 investors that started to do deals entirely online. By now, I think this is barely a discussion anymore, at least in this part of the world, because you either stopped investing or you found online solutions. But mentally, that's been a very big change that I've seen in what I do every day.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you for giving a bit of insight on the importance of support structure in the success of a product or a company. Now I direct a question to JX. I asked Keith earlier about competition. Now, in terms of building a product, in terms of competing, what do you think about consolidation? There are a lot of companies that the big ones, right, that have these super apps that do whatever you want in one app. And how do you differentiate your own product offering from theirs? Maybe not per se, not in particular Endowus, or maybe a product development in general. And in terms of Endowus, in respect to other platforms that may already also be offering some financial services similar to yours.
So I think consolidation is always going to happen all the time, right? It's not something that's going away. The question is, when would consolidation occur to you or your company? And I think that very much depends on the industry that you're in. If you are in a fast-growing industry, then consolidation is rare, or it's less likely to happen, just because there's just so much that's out there and everyone is more focused on grabbing and doing their land grab as opposed to consolidating. Now, in your industry that's a bit more mature, that's where things get a lot more competitive, and that's where consolidation will happen. So I think the first question or way I would approach that is to decide, are you in a fast growth industry or are you not in there? And there's no right or wrong answer, right? And companies can thrive in either or. Now, if you are in a fast growth sort of industry, then I think that what you want to focus on is just figure out, hey, like, what is the best way that I can grow? And how do I just it's all about growth, right? It's all about just going out there. Now, the interesting thing is that if you are in a slow growth industry, then how can you remain relevant? And I think the answer to that is to go as niche as you want as possible. And the interesting thing about going more and more niche, for example, do something and do it really, really, really well, is that it actually applies to both as well, because it could help you even if you're in a fast growth industry. So now here's the example. Let's take Endowus as an example. And Endowus, we're an investment platform. And, you know, in all of like fintech or, you know, or whatever you want to call it in the industry, we focus only on investing specifically using mutual funds. And our type of investing is very focused on just beta exposure. Basically, we are just only offering you a globally diversified, passive and low cost portfolio. There is no trading, trying to get alpha, trying to time the market, none, right? The product is very, 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 very simple, and we do all of that. Now, how is this niche helping us? If you look at it in a fast growth industry, Endowus could be seen as being a player in a fast growth industry because everyone's moving to digitizing wealth. At the same time, at Endowus, we also play in a very traditional and competitive industry, which is the sales of mutual funds. And how we compete there is to say that rather than having a fund platform with 1,000 funds and many of these different, you know, functions, which we do, but the way we package it is to just make everything very simple and just focus on providing one thing, which is how can we give you a globally diversified, low-cost portfolio? That's it. So it's about finding that niche and then playing to that advantage.
Yeah, thank you, JX, for insights on focusing on niche and simplicity. Now I direct the same question to Keith. In the fintech industry, I suppose you're focused on the Singapore market, right? So how would you consider achieving scale by expanding to other markets as well? And do you see any challenges in this, or is this a good opportunity for someone in, you know, I would say, working with the financial sector like yourself?
Yeah, so, you know, Hearti has been in the Southeast Asia market. So although we are a Singapore company from day one, our focus has been building products that can satisfy the needs of our customer across Southeast Asia. And one of the challenges across Southeast Asia would be, you know, language, culture, different practices. And if you are talking about fintech, different regulations and so on. And you know, we were quite clear which space we want to play, because like JX mentioned, you know, finance sector is very highly regulated. You probably need a license to operate, right? So we choose the SaaS model. We choose not to go with the license. We choose to build out a software where we can actually sell to customers on the SaaS model. And then we talk to, you know, various customers across Southeast Asia, customizing it, making it modular so that, you know, different customers in different countries, based on their needs, would actually deploy different modules that we have. Just for example, we have one module that does dynamic pricing for insurance product. And, you know, traditionally insurance product is a fixed price, right? You with the same age, if you go to, you know, insurer A or insurer B, that kind of pricing doesn't really change that much. What we do is we use the data that we collect from the market, and we help the insurer to price it differently. And different market will give you different data points. So, you know, we probably would have a difficult or very different pricing model for Thailand market compared to Indonesia market. So we allow that kind of flexibility for our customers, knowing that you know, the kind of challenges our customers face and the different operating environment that they are in, that help us kind of differentiate. But at the same time, you should have a common platform that you can offer, you know, repeatedly to different customers. So that's probably one area that we are quite passionate about.
Thank you for that, Keith. Now, I also asked a similar question to Anuj, but from a different perspective. So I think, you know, it could be a complex question. What is a good strategy for achieving scale? It could be generic, or, you know, you can focus on certain industries like fintech, for example, since we're all talking about, you know, similar topics here.
Right, it is a complex topic, especially in Asia, and this is what we specialize in. But again, I think one has to demystify a bit, because scaling for even different type of businesses. For example, B2C has a very completely different flavor to what we specialize in, which is more B2B. And B2B in Asia has obviously different sort of challenges, and Keith mentioned some of them about the regulatory practices, the what we call PEST, right? Political, economic, social, and technological variance is humongous, and the market sizes are not as huge as the same effort in a homogeneous market would have yielded much more effort. So you need different kind of solutions for Asian kind or European kind of fragmented ecosystems. Recently, I was on a panel with Luxembourg fintech sort of partner that we have, and they're facing the same challenges that a lot of fintechs face in Asia. So I would not touch upon B2C because there is this whole growth hack mentality and 7% big to weak and all these kind of fancy metric and what you need to hack. However, the problem that the insight that I had is that most of the startups, even if you're successful, say in Singapore or Thailand or any particular geography, is a challenge if you go to another market in Asia because it's a startup all over again. It's so different, the environment. And hence, the founders are left with no solution but to just keep raising funds, diluting themselves, and hire very costly resources. And it's a very inefficient sort of a process. And that's where we see a lot of burnout. How do you fix that without having, the regime of high fixed costs or random firing of, bullets of getting very costly consultants with limited networks and so on and so forth? So what's required is a very, easy plug and play sort of vast network of people, because we all know that in Asia still, in the world of super technology, the relationships, local know-how, a little bit of understanding of customization is required, right? So you need a pool of vast, heavily incentivized networks of which can pave the way to decision makers across these corporates. You also need a little bit of a systematic marketing know-how where the propositions can be tailored. And also you need platforms like which can give you local execution capabilities on system integrators, resellers. And above all, you also need very different set of partners in markets like Japan, for example, which is totally different way of go-to-market. Whatever you do in any other country is a Planet Japan approach. What we have done essentially is to provide entrepreneurs who have proven themselves in a particular geography, whether it's Europe, US, India, or anything in Southeast Asia, is to expand by plugging into this whole multi-layered ecosystem that we built. So we have a network of people who can open doors for proven companies and proven products into roughly 250 odd corporates. And warm introductions is still rule the roost. So that's one. And obviously there is a system integrator and reseller channel of thousands of resellers plugged in a way that can be identified and pitched for these founders to their solutions. So what people were doing essentially for Fortune 500 kind of companies or large brands, we are able to provide that same sort of impetus through these paired and incentivized partnerships for companies which I would say pre-series A to series B level, right? Still there is a challenge at the seed level companies where they're still at the POC level or the enterprise readiness of the product is not achieved yet. So for those early stage companies, I would advise is obviously you have to go into your unfair advantages of your networks, getting a little bit of an anchor customer, get in with a POC and prove that logo on the table. So enterprise readiness is something a lot of early stage startup founders don't understand. You need to have that before you even think of scale. Sometimes you just keep shooting a lot of your ammunition into scaling without even achieving the product market fit or some sort of credentialization. Once you've done that, then I think this whole multi-layered approach with partners like us or any others, if they have done that, is something which helps scaling. But you need to be cognizant of the fact that you will need these kind of networks in Asia at least, right?
Thank you for that, Anuj. Very interesting insight. Now, I think I shall direct a similar question to Robin, but framed differently. So, Robin, how do you simplify entrepreneurship in the context of building and marketing a product? And in terms of success and scaling that I asked about earlier from Anuj, how do you replicate success in different markets?
Well, first of all, entrepreneurship is never simple. I know a lot of entrepreneurs, but I don't know anybody who says, well, I made a plan when I started out and it all came about the way I had planned and it was great and we did it in 6 months. Maybe one of you has met an entrepreneur like that, but I haven't. In the end, entrepreneurs have to learn a lot, especially if they're first-time entrepreneurs. For second or third-time entrepreneurs, it becomes different. That's why those entrepreneurs are also very popular with investors, because they already made the mistakes. But first-time entrepreneurs, you always have to learn a lot, because there's now studies coming about entrepreneurship, but usually it's a 3-month or 4-month program. And in my opinion, you don't become an entrepreneur in 3 or 4 months. The way we support that is giving you all the generic information tools, network that typically 99% of the entrepreneurs at some point in their journey need. And we give you the guideline in terms of the program that we have. We have a startup builder and we help you through the different steps that typically any company needs to go through when they start at an idea and want to get to the fundraising stage. However, having said that, as far as I'm aware, and I think Anuj was saying the same thing, but in a different way, entrepreneurship in the end is still very difficult. As far as I'm aware, the numbers haven't changed over the years. Still 9 out of 10 startups do fail. The whole technology part has become a lot easier. But then in the end, your company is only going to be successful if you find that product market fit sweet spot, which is very hard to get, even in one place. Like most of us are based here in Singapore. I'm on WhatsApp every day, my co-founder on WeChat. We live in the same country, we run the same company, we both speak English, and still, like for that specific thing, which we use hours and hours a day, we use 2 different apps. So finding product market fit is the hardest thing to get. That's unfortunately something that every entrepreneur has to figure out by themselves, because if I told you the secret sauce for that, we would all be having unicorns by now.
Yeah, thank you for that, Robin. Okay, now we have a question from the audience from Michael Yin, addressed to JX. So, you have advocated heavily on green financing and sustainable finance, but what are the challenges you are facing now in encouraging more clients to dive into it? And are you collaborating with other green fintech firms in commercializing your financial products on your platform?
One thing that we're very proud at Endowus is that we're mission driven. And so when we launched ESG, we actually launched it almost more than a year ago. We're definitely the pioneers in this space. And the really interesting thing is that when we launched ESG, so like green financing, right, environmental, social, and government, when we launched products for that, the reason why we wanted to do that is because for anyone who wants to invest in ESG, it was actually only available to institutional investors. As a retail investor, it was almost impossible. It was very difficult. Now, we know there's greenwashing and all of that stuff, but to actually buy an ESG portfolio that is globally diversified and low cost was almost impossible. And so when we thought about that, and we thought about the question, I think the challenge definitely for us is that when you launch an institutional grade ESG portfolio, how do you communicate that to clients in a way so that you can drive awareness? Because a very big challenge is that clients who see that, most clients don't care. They're like, give me Bitcoin or give me, I don't know, ARK or like, whatever, all of those, right? And for the clients who do care, it's really hard to cut through all the noise to get to them. So I think that the number one thing is really driving awareness, which is why I think that we spend a lot of time not just in creating the best portfolios, but also educating it, and our clients around that. So the second part of your question is really interesting. How are we collaborating with other green fintech firms in commercializing that? I think that is a really interesting point, because from our angle, what we've really been thinking about is how do we find the best fund managers and the best funds and bring it onto our platform. But I think something that we can definitely do more is to figure out what are all of the other firms who are also interested in this space to do something together to spread awareness. Because I think for us, truly, we believe that it's not something that's thematic that will come and go. We believe that it is the future, and we believe that it permeates every single part of investing already. And so how do we sort of lead with that, but at the same time to continue to drive that awareness? And I think partnering with other firms is a great idea.
Yeah, thank you for that insight, Jex. Now, our audience asked about ESG, so maybe I would like to direct a question to Anuj in terms of the trends, right? So there are trends in in investing and in building products and focusing on these challenges on ESG. So what do you think are the emerging themes today? Digitalization, ESG, given the pandemic, and how are support structures like yourself addressing these, and how are companies, are we on a race to build these solutions, or are we taking it rationally?
It's a very good question, and I'll answer in two ways. One, there is an organic direction of travel which is in the right direction, where I think the general consciousness of the world, especially driven by young people, towards having this ESG sort of at the center play of any business, is really driving the roost, right? So I know some of our family office friends and all this stuff, or multi-family office friends, who were telling me about incidents where they're presenting a product of, say, a petroleum company or something to their clients. And in an old world, the clients was just focused on transactional return on investment and return profiles. And a 19-year-old daughter of the client who was accompanying to get ready for taking over the reins had actually interjected and said, no, this is not a sort of socially compliant company, and we should not invest in that. So I mean, there is a lot of this movement which is happening across companies, and even some companies like IKEA. I was just talking to someone saying that even the suppliers have to be compliant. So there is a definite movement towards this larger, cleaner imagery around what we're doing for our planet. Are we conscientious, and so on and so forth. However, it's almost now becoming like a gold rush for a lot of people who just try to hack the system. Obviously, there's always this yin and yang that coexist. And what I see there on the other side, or negative side of this ESG gold rush, is 80%. When you read the survey reports and all, 80% of the investors would say, oh yes, we would like to invest in ESG products and all this stuff. And only 25% of them we actually end up doing something. So having a large intent, and why that intent is also there is to look good, to feel good, to be seen good, is a different thing than actually doing something about it. So yes, I do believe that going forward, going through this chaos, it is going to be the center play of each business, including small companies, SMEs, large corporates, whatever. But at this juncture, I think JX mentioned this point, this education and awareness, and cutting through the clutter to reach out to those real authentic ones who are not just greenwashing, but actually believing in it and backing those companies, is something of a challenge. But it's a definite trend, and wherever there's trend, there are a lot of friends. So a lot of friends of this trend are riding the wave or trying to do so. Yeah. Other trends, obviously, as we know, I mean, specifically in ESG, clean tech is one of the big ones that we are also working on. We're launching a sustainability initiative on clean tech, food waste management. We've invested in a company into food waste management as well. So all these things, but it's not even for that company. I mean, I don't know if you know this company called Lumitex. It's a fantastic founder, fantastic technology. But the adoption of the technology, what people say in newspapers, large hotels and conglomerates, and what they actually initiate, there is a phase lag, and I'm sure it's going to be plugged in soon. But it's not a cakewalk just because it's in the media.
Okay, thank you for that, Anuj. I think we learned a lot from these are very enlightening concepts these days, right? Now, I direct a question to Robin, since you mentioned earlier something about your zero emissions fund. So, in light of these concepts by Anuj, what are the dynamics with companies that build products based on sustainability?
So I very much think there's a very big trend already that has already started, and it's only going to grow. I'm not so sure if it's a gold rush in this case. And a gold rush sounds to me as optional. In this case, I think it's kind of mandatory that there will be a lot more money going into sustainable solutions companies, helping combat climate change, helping startups come up with new solutions to change the climate problem. That's why we're setting up the Zero Emissions Fund. So the fund is currently in setup. We have already launched the accelerator. So companies that are working on services or products that help reduce climate change, but also that work on other ESG targets from the UN can join our online accelerator, be part of the program, and that way leverage on the startup body for free, which normally you have to take a membership for. The reason we set up the Zero Emissions Fund was we did want to invest in some of the companies on our platform, but since there's too many, we didn't want to become another generic fund. And me having a background from Europe, I've been lucky enough to see this trend already happening for around 30 years in Europe. Green banks, green financing, sustainable financing is much more developed there. I don't think there's any other way for Asia to follow that trend. It's actually happening in many parts of Asia. China is already doing a lot, Northern Asia as well. The big problem that I see from a startup perspective is that a lot of the development is actually done for developing countries and is not always applicable in this region, in Southeast Asia. To give a very concrete example, it's great that we have Tesla and EV cars now, but I don't really see those as a solution for upcoming economies like Indonesia or Philippines or India anywhere in the near future. So to do something in this area, there needs to be development from new ideas that help to solve this problem here in the region as well. And that's why we set up the Zero Emissions Fund here.
Thank you for that, Robin. Like you mentioned something about energy. I direct this question to Keith. You may be aware, right, that recently there has been increases in prices, energy prices, oil prices, and since you're working with companies in insurance and financial institutions, right? So what will be the impact of these recent trends and events on how companies deal with each other, how companies build products, and how companies and customers interface with each other? What will be the future in the midterm and the long term with these world events or trends today?
Yeah. So I guess everyone's impacted by all these trends and sustainability and climate change. Even the banks and insurance companies, right? If we are looking at some of their portfolio, insurance companies are very much exposed to floods, climate change, disasters, because that's where most of their claims will come in and disrupt everything, right? So that's probably something that we have to always consider in terms of the product built in that they have. One of the product that we provide to, let's say, banks and insurance company is the ability to stress test their portfolio. And that's where the data points will come in from climate change. And that's also something that is very new. Where do we get the data points for climate change and how are they relevant to the models that you actually build within the product for banks and insurance company? So that's where the the evolution of your products needs to be, because you cannot just put a fixed module there and hope that it just run. Consistently, you need to stress test and back test and make sure that the new data points that's coming in is relevant and is able to meet the challenges that your customers is actually managing because of all these new trends that is coming into the market, be it energy prices, be it climate change data points, be it a disaster somewhere that impact the banks or insurance companies' products and portfolio.
Thank you, Keith. So you mean risk and that this data has to be incorporated early on in the product. Okay,
that's right.
So we have a question from the audience, and I think we only have a few minutes left. So I will ask JX, and maybe you can move on to your concluding statements so we can conclude the panel. So any specific product management framework you can use or you use in creating new products or improving the current product?
Yeah, I would say that it's we don't really have any sort of framework per se, but I would say that there are three generic principles that we follow. I think that the first thing is definitely looking at our users, but talking to users may actually be pretty misleading, because most of the time users may not know what they want. And so I think that the first thing that we actually look at is just look at industry trends. Are we growing in the right area? Are we in the area that people are generally interested in? And then after that, talk to users and figure out, hey, what is it they're struggling with? Observe them and talk to them. And only after we have decided what is the most important thing to build, then we go on to like the whole thing about working with engineering and speccing it out, scoping it out, and then translating it to other people. In terms of improving current product, it's interesting because we always struggle between two things. What are the new things we want to develop versus what are the things that we want to maintain? And the way I think about it is that we have an offensive lane and a defensive lane. Defensive is just making sure that things work, there are no bugs. And then the offensive lane is like what we want to push through. Now, what's very interesting is that how much you play offense or defense depends on the industry that you're in. In financial services and in fintech, the problem with compliance and regulators is that you don't get rewarded for doing well, but you get penalized if you do something wrong. So naturally, we spend a lot more time on the defensive stuff, making sure that we don't screw up. And so naturally, I would say that a lot of time is just spent making sure that we maintain stuff, things doesn't break, things are like super stable. And then we try to push as much as we can on offensive stuff because that's what brings around growth. So I'll just like leave it at that.
Okay, thank you, JX. And for concluding statements, anything else you'd like to add, JX, as your conclusion?
Yeah, no, I think that this has been a great and fascinating conversation that's pretty wide-ranging. I think it's rare that you'll find in that conversation you go from ESG to product development to different trends across the different markets to like startup stories. So I would say that it's just great to come together to think about product in so many different ways. Product is not just like what you use and feel, but I think it cuts across into the entire ecosystem, across different cultures, overcoming all of these barriers.
Thank you, JX. And any concluding statements, Robin?
Yeah, I actually want to do a shout out to Alibaba Cloud, and I'll explain why. Probably, but I'm on the panel here because in July I got invited for the Alibaba Netpreneur program, which was a collaboration between Alibaba and Enterprise Singapore. So we had a lot of entrepreneurs from Philippines, Indonesia, and Singapore learning about the digital economy and the business models of Alibaba and the digital ecosystem in China. Especially since we can't be traveling at the moment, this was super interesting and I learned a lot. And for future entrepreneurs and for future batches, if you get the opportunity to join a program like that, really do, because what was really eye-opening for me is there's so many trends around the world that even in a modern country like Singapore, I haven't seen before, like China. I don't have time to explain you all of it, but it's super interesting. But that also really helps you then in either your day-to-day job or like JX was just saying, if you're a product manager coming up with new ideas for your service or whatever. So thanks a lot, Alibaba, that I could be part of that and for having me on the panel, and I had a great time.
Okay, thank you, Robin. Anything you'd like to say to our audience, Keith?
Yeah, I think the audience probably witnessed quite a wide-ranging kind of topics and different angles and different views from the panelists. Just want to conclude that we would look at things quite differently based on the type of business that we are in, whether is it B2C, B2B kind of business, whether you are a CEO or product manager. I guess the different role and different views that everyone brings to the table is important because you want to make sure that you get a full wide view before you launch into a product building. And you don't want to make that mistake of building a product that doesn't fit the market, right? So I think it's very important to kind of have a very clear vision of what you're building based on the kind of role and the industry and the business model that you have.
Thank you, Keith. And Anuj, anything you'd like to say to our audiences?
I think a lot has already been said, and I think beautifully so. I would just like to say that in the history of mankind, these are the best times to be alive. So first of all, stay safe. Second, dream on. And finally, build well, because a lot of times we are getting sexed up about building because technology can do a lot. But I think it should be a more inclusive approach, more outside in rather than inside out. And you take it for granted that anything you can dream of can be built, but then spend more time outside, your offices and co-working spaces and be with the customers and really listen to the market, because I'm sure we are smart enough today and all information is so sort of open platformized that you can put everything together. But I think there is a huge gap in understanding how to build products based on what market is asking versus what you're assuming. So stay safe and build well.
Thank you, Anuj. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Robin, and thank you, JX. So everyone, kindly excuse the short extension of our time, and I hope you have, we learned a lot. I learned a lot personally from the discussion and from the insights, and we do hope to meet each other again, maybe face to face soon. Okay, have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Stanley.
Okay, thank you very much for all the panelists and of course our attendees today. So if you'd like to learn a little bit more about what Alibaba Cloud Community Day and Apsara is about, we do have quite a slew of programs that is happening from today to tomorrow. So there you go. Subsequently, there's a lot more things exciting related to the Alibaba Cloud Platform. If you want to learn how to leverage on that to upskill your products, to supercharge that, stay tuned for this. Check it out. All right. If not, that will be all for today's webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. Panelists, wonderful wisdom, intelligence, and insights. Have a great day, guys.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
See ya. Okay, that's a wrap. See you, Robin.